Introduction. Thank you for that introduction. I am Amanda Baker. I am a freelance video producer in Champaign, Illinois. My video production company is called, like Janie said, is 5 Foot Productions. And yes, it's because I'm 5 feet tall. Technically I'm 4'11 3/4, but the URL for that was way too long. So we just went with 5 Foot Productions. It rolls off the tongue a little bit better. My background is in journalism. I have a graduate degree in journalism and I love storytelling. I've been doing professional video for the past 13 years. What I haven't been doing is doing professional Zooming for the past 3 years, and now I've lost the oh, there it is. I lost the share my screen button. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with this lovely PowerPoint that I have created. Okay. All right. I love storytelling. That's my background, and video really is the ultimate storytelling medium. It engages the audience very quickly using multiple senses. It's more captivating, it's more memorable, it's more persuasive than any other digital medium. And it's now accessible right at your fingertips. Anyone with an iPhone and a dream can create engaging and persuasive video content for their platforms. Social media video these days doesn't have to be Hollywood quality to be effective. Modern audiences are now used to video that is created by a layman, and that can create because they're being created by a layman, it creates this more relatable and authentic messaging much more so rather than its high production value counterpart. In other words, you are very capable of producing your own video content that is effective and persuasive. And I'm here to give you just a few tips to keep in mind and a few other things to sort of heighten the content experience for your audience. But Amanda, I'm not a videographer. Yes, you are. Everybody is, because the tool sits right in your pocket. I don't think, in my opinion, small businesses use video enough to tell their story. And I understand it's kind of a mysterious, a sort of scary, a sort of like intimidating thing to do in terms of video. And that's why I'm successful in my freelance career. People often outsource that sort of intimidating endeavor to me, but I'm here to empower you once again to do it and create your own content. Plus, this is going to give you a sort of, once you start creating your own video content, it'll give you a stock of content that you can have in case you do hire someone professionally to make your video content for you. All right, pre-production. It's just a fancy industry term for planning. So we're going to go through some really basic pre-production workflow here to get juices flowing, to figure out the kind of content that you want to make. And these are just really a series of questions to ask yourself when you're in the pre-production stage. Number one is, what platforms are you going to use? Social media. Are you on Facebook? Are you on Snapchat? Are you on TikTok? Are you on what are the other ones? Instagram, Reels, any of those new and new platforms, which I am way too old to know about now, but they're out there and they keep being made. And so it's important to, or are these videos going to be in an email that you send out to your email subscribers? Or are you playing these things during a tour, or are you playing these during an event? These are the questions that you need to ask in terms of your platform. Another question is, who is your audience? And you know that question, you know that answer better than anybody else. Next one is, what's your timeline? How much time do you actually have to create this content? That's going to be a pretty big factor in what kind of workflow you work with in terms of creating that content. Is your content going to be scripted? Is it going to be narrated in any way? Or is it just footage with music or just footage with no sound at all for a reel or something like that? What is your message? These are really basic questions again, but it's important to figure out, is your message a broad overview of your brand? Or is it a day-to-day sort of story that would relate, like a sort of a quick story that would relate to your audience, that something that is happening that day that is cool that you want to tell your message? What's the story behind it? What are the key, who are the key players? What's happening? Is there conflict? Not necessarily like an argument, or what's the solution to the problem that you were facing that you figured out works and would be cool to tell your audience about? That's the story that you want to come up with. And how can you make this relatable and authentic to your brand? Again, these are questions that you can only answer, but those are some really basic pre-production questions to go through before you start making any sort of content. Okay, now we're going to go into this is another sort of empowerment to you. I have shot everything from banking to farming in my 13 years of professional videography. And let me tell you, banking versus farming, which do you feel like is more visual? It's farming, for sure. There's only so many times that I can shoot people shaking hands in an office to tell the story of a bank. But on a farm and a farmer's market and any of those, there's the visuals are endless. And so my more exciting and my more projects that I'm more proud of have something to do with agriculture or something more visual rather than banking. I've shot way too much stuff with banking before. So I'm going to go through some basic tips about production. We're going to get into a lot of how to shoot something, how to make something a little bit more compelling on camera. All right, and our first basic rule of framing is something called the rule of thirds. Both video and photography uses, and really design uses this rule of thirds. And already this might sound like we're getting into the weeds, but this is a really basic composition guideline. This goes back to how our brains organize information, and framing an image is part of how we are organizing information. We read an image that follows this rule of thirds as more compelling and more beautiful. So automatically, if you follow this, your images are going to catch someone's eye much more if they don't follow this rule. You'll see also, if you follow this rule, you'll see an immediate increase in quality of your images. Same with photography. Even those selfies should be following those rule of thirds. Next, we're going to meet my cat, Nymeria. She's my spunky and sort of camera-ready cat who was brave enough to be in this presentation, even though she had no choice. She's going to be illustrating some of these things, including the rule of thirds. So we have a couple of examples here. On the bottom left image, you can see Nymeria is right smack in the middle of the frame. She gets kind of lost. We're not sure what to focus on at this point. Whereas the top right photo, her face is placed right in the top right third of the photo. We have a better sense of what to focus on the purpose of this photo. It tells a story a little bit better. We know where she is a little bit better and what she's doing. She's obviously looking out this window, probably trying to spot some birds or geese that are outside. And we know where to focus. We want to focus on her face at this point. And here's, so I have sort of this example with and without the grids. So you can see, which is, oh, she's better composed in the top right there. Okay. Next, we're going to get into the depth of an image. This is where we get to get into making our videos sort of mimic how we see things in real life, we want to create sort of a 3D space in what we shoot, which means we need depth. Foreground imagery and background imagery is how we achieve this. Images that are flat are less compelling and don't tell a story as effectively as something with more of a 3D look, a 3D feeling about it. Again, we have Nymeria here illustrating for us what I am trying to say here. Let's see, we can see two pictures here. One on the left is flat. We don't have a lot of foreground, if really at all. Some would say that Nymeria, the cat, is the foreground, but really we need a different kind of foreground, and I'll talk about that in a bit. We do have a background here, but again, this is a really flat image. There's not a whole lot of depth going on here. The image on the left, you can see, has quite a bit of depth. We've got foreground. The foreground is the bottom right of that image. It's a little bit of the couch, right? We have, and this is creating sort of the extreme foreground that we need. And then we have Nymeria right there. Her face is the focus. And then we have a lot of background imagery. So we can see the bookcase, we can see the window and the curtain. We have a sense of depth in that image. And that's what I want you guys to try to achieve when you're shooting, is a sense of depth. We need a foreground, just a little bit of something in the foreground. In the middle there should be what we're focusing on, and then there should be a nice background in behind everything else. That's what we see in real life. Okay. Next, we have the next tip for shooting. We have movement. Video is literally moving pictures. This is the advantage of it. And I want you to take advantage of it because it's a huge benefit in storytelling. Now, in the early days of video creation, you can see Charlie Chaplin here, directors would just place the camera on a tripod and place the action in front of it. But what we slowly learned with filmmaking and video making is that the camera can move too, and not just on a pivot, not just panning back and forth. Good, compelling camera movement requires the camera holder to move. And when I'm shooting video, or when you guys are shooting video, I like to move my body back and forth from left to right, keeping my arms right at my body, and so I can keep the camera as still as possible, because what we don't want is a lot of hand shaky movement. And if you are shooting with your phone, phones have a really good built-in image stabilization that will handle a lot of that shaky movement, but your arms locked at your side will help with that as well. Yeah, so this is Charlie Chaplin is just an example of how we used to shoot video with just a static camera on a tripod, but nowadays the compelling footage is shot with the camera moving itself. So I have two examples in my living room here. Movement is especially enhanced when you have depth in your shot, that foreground and that background that I was just talking about. The foreground of the image will actually move a lot faster in your frame than the background will. Excuse me. It's like when you rode in a car when you were a kid and you were looking out the back seat window, and the trees would move a lot faster than the field in the background, right? Or the farm in the background, or whatever else was in the background. That's your foreground. And so that's gonna, as you can see on the left here, we have a little bit of foreground. It's like the chair and the TV stand, but on the one on the right, there's the door frame, and that's giving us a lot more movement. And in both of these videos, my body was moving the exact same amount, right? I was not moving I was not moving to the left anymore in either one of these videos. And so you can see the movement is a lot more engaging. I've lost my spot. Excuse me for a minute while I look at this. Okay. So now we get into types of movement. Now, I'm not expecting you guys to learn this kind of thing. This is just illustrating the different kinds of movement your camera can do. And in my line of work, all of my clients call it panning, but there's actually different terms for all of this. So if you really want to get smart with how you're shooting your video, you would learn all these terms, but please, you don't need to. There's dollying, which is moving the camera back and forth. Booming, moving the camera up and down. Trucking, which is left to right. Panning, which is what everybody calls everything, which that is just the camera on a pivot, moving back and forth, and so on and so forth. So what I want you guys to take away from this is that there is a variety of creative things that you can do with your camera. The goal is to just be creative as possible, and getting all of those movements and the rule of thirds in there, and a depth along with some camera movement. All right, Nymeria again, once again, illustrating different angles that we can do. This is my last tip for shooting. As you can see here, I'm the one, Nymeria on the left is taken at my own height, right? It's higher than she is at that time, on the couch. But then on the run on the right is right at her eye level. And this does a few things that we just discussed. One, it creates a depth, a nicer depth to this particular situation, to this particular story that we're telling, that she's looking out the window on a beautiful day. We are able to connect with her, our main character, a lot better with the one on the right, whereas the one on the left, we're kind of just observing her instead of connecting with her, if that makes sense. And so the point of this about getting different angles is to really just achieve those different things that we talked about: depth, rule of thirds, better storytelling, those kinds of things. So I would encourage you, when you're out shooting, try different angles. You'll be able to achieve all of those other things that we just talked about. And ultimately, all of these rules are meant to be broken. Obviously, rules are meant to be broken in general. But what I want you to take away from this is a basic understanding of these rules. And then once you get comfortable with them, you can start being a lot more creative with your angles, your rule of thirds, depth, all of that. Okay. Oh, and ultimately, I forgot the other point. That was ultimately all of these rules are meant to create an image that is a lot more compelling than if you weren't paying attention to any of these kinds of things. And the more compelling your footage is, the better story you're telling, the better engaged your audience is. And that's the whole point of all of this. All right, let's talk about lighting. But Amanda, this is not Hollywood lighting. That's right, we are not Hollywood, but that doesn't mean we should ignore lighting. There are lots of easy ways to pay attention to lighting and how it affects your shot. Number one, if you're inside, pay attention to your window opportunities. Is there a window available to you? Can you move your subject towards the window? These are the questions that I want you to ask while you're inside, if you're shooting something inside. Nymeria, once again, illustrating the lighting opportunities inside. The image on the left, this is backlighting, when the window is behind your subject. Obviously, this makes it so that it's very difficult to see her face. And this is because the camera is competing with the intense amount of light that is coming from the window and can't quite adjust it correctly so that we can see her. And most cameras on phones will struggle with this. So pay attention. All you have to do is turn around that subject, turn the camera so that the light that is coming from the window is facing your subject. This is gonna do two things. One, it's going to actually light them, but also window light most of the time will give a lot of really great, even diffused light. If it's giving really harsh light, you can always close a sheer curtain, or you can step away from the window a little bit more. Whatever your opportunities are, I would suggest always finding, when you're inside, finding a window. Most of the other lighting opportunities inside a building or a home are not great for relying on entirely. Lamps are too dim. Overhead lights create really weird shadows on the face that are not very flattering. Window lighting is your best bet as a main lighting source. And if you are using window as your lighting source, turn off other lights. Try to turn off other lights entirely. You most likely will not need them. Okay, when we're outside shooting, the sun can be your worst enemy, or it could be your best friend. Harsh sunlight, the kind that comes from the sky with no clouds and when the sun is high in the sky, can create some really harsh shadows on the face or on your subject that is not flattering for anything. Even if it's not a face, if it's, it's going to create those really unnatural looking shadows. If you're using the sun as your main source of light outside, try shooting in the morning or in the evening when the sun is lower in the sky. It's going to give more flattering shadows, and it's going to give more of a depth of color rather than that harsh sun. The sunlight during the day is really blue, weirdly enough, but during the morning and the evening, it's much more golden. Photographers, especially family photographers, refer to this hour as golden hour because the sun tends to be really golden at that point and is super flattering on the face or really any other subject. If you are having to shoot during harsh sun times, I would suggest finding shade under a tree or by a building. Just make sure that the subject is entirely in the shade and you don't have any sort of sunlight peeking through. You can see on this picture on the left here that she's clearly mostly in the shadow, but some of her face is not, and that's really distracting, and really distracting for the viewer, but also for her. You don't want sun getting in your subject's eyes too much while they're trying to talk. Here's another example of horrible, harsh shadows and harsh light versus more even light. All we did here is we turned the subject so that the sun was more even on her face. We could have also brought her into a shadow, but the light at that time that we were doing this really worked well on her face. This is just a matter of playing with angles and playing with the light and playing with where to put her and where not to put her. Just a few minutes of usually playing around with light gets you a much better outcome than if you didn't pay attention to it at all. The next thing, so I want to talk about storytelling for a little bit in terms of production. When we shoot video, our first focus is telling that story, right? And so one of the things that we need to pay attention to is the variety of shots that we're getting and the variety of frames that we're getting. We've got three main shots that we can grab. We grab a wide shot, or as a lot of people like to call it, an establishing shot. This tells us where we are in space. This is obviously my living room. And so I wanted to illustrate, yes, we're in a living room. We've got a couch, and we've got books, and we've got a nice window, and we've got a lamp and some artwork. We are clearly in someone's home at this point. Our medium shot is there to tell a little bit of that story, but to get closer in. This is also sort of just like an intermediate shot. between a wide shot and a close-up, because if we cut straight from a wide shot to a close-up, it's a little bit jarring. And so we want to, sometimes we use medium shots just to have something in between, so we're not so jarred. And then of course we have a close-up, which is what we want our audience to pay attention to. This is like, hey, pay attention to this right now. And the audience is not confused at all what they are having to look at and what to pay attention to. And so when you're out shooting, grab these, to help your, grab a wide, medium, close-ups all the time to help tell that story that you want to tell. Okay, next we're going to talk about on-camera talent. So this could be anyone, this could be you, this could be the people, anybody that you're shooting. When I say talent, talent only really means like the person in front of the camera. It's just a fancy word in the industry to say person on camera. And so it's important when you have someone on camera that they're confident, that they're prepared, and that they're camera ready. And when I say prepared, I don't mean like memorized a script. Most of the time when we're shooting other people, they are not, in your line and in my line of work too, they're not professional actors. They're not reading, they're not well-versed in reading a script without it sounding like they're reading a script. But people tend to do well if they prepare certain talking points and are able to be sort of like off the cuff on camera with those kinds of with talking points, like I am right now. I'm not a trained professional actor or really much of a public speaker, but I have certain talking points that I'm going over. And I don't have a script prepared. Otherwise, it would sound like I was reading a script. And so take in mind when you have talent on camera, what are their capabilities? What are their abilities on camera, and how confident are they? When I say camera ready, I don't mean in like a suit. I mean that they are looking presentable in a way that is not distracting to the viewer. I know you all work in either on farms or farmers markets or whatever. So, be in your natural state, but, make sure your hair is a little bit tighter or something. That's what I mean by camera ready. It's just being on camera without having something distracting from your message. A few things to pay attention to when you do have someone on camera. If you're outside, are they squinty? Is the sun really distracting to them? Because that's going to take away from their message. People watching this are going to tell that they're struggling in the sun. How is that? We just talked about how the light is on their face. Is it even? Is it really harsh? Are they distracted by the sun? We want to make sure that our talent on camera is looking and feeling their best, so that they can deliver the message that you've asked them to deliver. One other thing that I want to talk about in terms of sunlight is that sometimes we get a really nice sunny day and you start shooting, and then a cloud comes in and changes your whole lighting game. Luckily, the camera on your phone is pretty well equipped to handle that lighting change, but we're still going to notice a pretty significant difference between when a cloud comes in. And sometimes clouds can move very quickly, creating like this instant change, and then it's going to distract the viewer. So pay attention to the sky. If it's cloudy, if it's a sunny cloud, it's like a partially cloudy day, maybe try to find some shade to shoot underneath instead of relying on the consistency of the light that you're getting from the sun. Okay, next, that's all video. Next, we're going to talk about audio. Bad audio makes bad video. I'm going to repeat that. Bad audio makes bad video, period. Pay attention when you're shooting. Pay attention to these things. We've got birds, and I'm not just talking about like ambient bird chirping. I'm talking about like those loud birds that are uppity for some reason during the season at some point. Those ones we want to steer clear of. Are there any trucks beeping? Are there any other machines beeping in the background? Is there construction going on? Who else is in the background? Who's talking? Is there someone laughing really loudly in the background? Try to mitigate those as much as possible. If there is wind going on outside, that can be really distracting and really that can really make your any sort of anybody talking on camera. Wind can really disrupt that. It'll make it almost unusable at that point. So try to find either go inside when it's really windy, or try to find something with a few different walls that you can go under, but try to mitigate that wind as much as possible. When you're inside, there's a few things that can really mess up your audio. An echoey room can really be very distracting for your audio. An air conditioner, especially a louder one, or any sort of HVAC system that's going on and off, can really distract from your audio. Anybody wearing noisy jewelry on their wrists or on their neck, and they're talking with their hands a lot, that can be really distracting too. And all of these things happen in our natural. All of these things happen in our natural state, right? But we in person learn to tune all of these things out, but a mic is not trained to tune all of these things out. A mic will pick up a lot of these things, especially if you're using the mic just on your phone or the built-in mic without using any sort of additional professional mic. And I'm gonna suggest a mic later in a little bit that can mitigate a lot of these things, but these are just things to pay attention to when you're shooting. And again, bad audio makes for bad video. We definitely pay attention to your audio when you're shooting something, especially if someone's talking on camera. Okay, so that's production. So we went through pre-production, which is just planning, production, which is shooting, and then now we're going to talk about post-production. And I'm just going to touch on a few tips about post-production, because your post-production is a fancy term for editing. Everybody has a different workflow, so I'm not going to go through different ways of editing or anything, because everyone does different things in different ways. And if you have specific questions about editing, you can ask me later. But these are just things to keep in mind when storing or saving your videos. I would suggest a cloud solution. iCloud if you're using an iPhone, Google Drive, that can be an app that you download on any phone. Same with Dropbox. Dropbox has a really great app on your phone to save all of those things. Videos that are shot with phones do save as MP4s, which is a universally used format for video. And when we talk about saving your videos, you know, this is when you're starting to shoot your own video and to gather your own content, it's really actually a huge advantage if you then turn to someone professionally and say, hey, I need a video. You are starting your own stock of video at this point. One of the biggest questions that I have when I start to work with a client is if they have assets, whether that's video or pictures or whatever, already in the bag. Because sometimes people want a video made in 2 months, but then is an overview of their entire organization that has seasons, right, or events that they've done, and none of that is captured. If it is captured, that is music to my ears, because then those are assets that I can then turn and use to better tell their story. So my point is that be ready to capture anything, even if it's unexpected, and document all of those things so that you can tell your story anytime you need to, whether it's on your own or with a professional. Okay. So we just talked about a lot of production stuff. I'm just going to go through a couple of some gear options, including a mic. We're shooting on your phone, and this can be, this is for specifically iPhones, but there are mics like this for all different kinds of phones. But I wanted to show you guys this one because it's small, it's cheap. You can plug in earbuds into it to monitor the sound that you're getting. This particular mic, it's called a boom mic. And what it does is it's a directional mic. So it's only, I shouldn't say only, it'll focus on picking up audio in the direction that you're pointing it to. So much more than your built-in mic in your phone. And so this is really good if you're wanting to get really decent audio from any other sort of footage that you're shooting that is not someone talking on camera. So for example, when you're in a farmer's market and you want to just capture that really great ambient sound of people just talking with each other, but not necessarily needing to hear what they're saying specifically, just that nice ambient chatter. This is a great mic to gather that audio with. Not entirely necessary, but it's such a basic, easy tool to have to plug in and out, and it's only $80. I couldn't believe that I found something like this for a phone, and it's really because all of these like the vlogging culture that we have now, the YouTube culture that we have right now, which is huge and makes these kinds of things very in demand. And so there's tons of accessories that you can plop onto your iPhone or your other phone, and it would get you great quality audio. This is another mic. This is called a lav mic. Some people call it a lapel mic because it clips right onto somebody's lapel. This mic specifically is really great when you have someone talking on camera. This is going to isolate their voice, not entirely from the background noise. If you have someone cackling in the background, it's going to pick that up. But this is really good to put on somebody when they're talent on camera. And you can monitor the audio with Bluetooth headphones, or if you have an older phone that has a microphone jack, a headphone jack, you can plug into there. But this again is going to just give you a little bit of a higher production value than just the built-in mic on your phone. And this one last gear recommendation, this is called a gimbal. This is something that will help you keep your footage steadier than if you were just holding your phone. Also, this is a really great device to walk with if you want to do a walkthrough tour of the market, or if you just want to have a little bit of a steadier shot and an easier time of holding. This is really ergonomical for your hand. It's just a really great tool. And again, this is so cheap. It's $160. It's crazy cheap. This particular brand, DJI, is a really great professional brand for gimbals. I own a more professional gimbal that holds my big camera, and I use it all the time. It's intuitively, you can use it very intuitively. It just works really well, and it works very much like a chicken head. Why do chickens have stabilization? I don't know, but I thought this was hilarious, and this exactly sort of illustrates how a gimbal works, just like that. So I'm sure some of you are familiar with chickens and how stable their heads are. All right, that's all I had for you all. I am very open to questions. I love answering any sort of specific question that you might have about any sort of video. Thank you for listening to me ramble on about shooting compelling video. I'm assuming Janie is around.
Yes, I'm here. Anybody have any questions? You can either unmute yourself or put it in the chat for Amanda. Any questions?